Greetings, I'm Dike Rostant. Welcome back to the TTT News. 2 years before the pandemic, after 26 years in the aviation industry, Rhonda Maria Glynn started a consultancy firm targeting entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and startups. It's time to go in-depth on the reasons behind that move, as well as other factors driving Zoma Business Solutions. So welcome, Rhonda. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm good. I'm talking to you from my office in Trin City.
Okay. Always a nice thing to be able to do and to have a space to be able to claim as your own. But I want to ask you, I want to start off with the inspiration. Is it aggressive push out of the nest? Is it inspiration? I mean, after 26 years in one place, is it more about walking away from that, or is it walking towards Zoma Business Solutions?
Okay, so that's a very good question. So there's a story behind that question. The truth is, I took early retirement. So it means that I didn't even wait for retirement, official retirement, to retire. As I like to tell people, I didn't retire to retire. I've spent 30, to be honest, 30 plus years in aviation. And during my 30 years, I've worked in different capacities. I worked as a course developer, a trainer. At one point in time, I was even seconded to the Office of the Prime Minister, where I worked as a research analyst in a non-governmental think tank. So when I came back after that 2-year secondment, although I was qualified both aviation-wise and academically, I got the feeling that I had outgrown my time, and it happens to the best of us. And then I decided, you know what? What is it that I am good at? And I literally took pen and paper and started to write down the pros and cons. And that gave me a lot of confidence that, you know what? This is something that I could literally move my aviation experience and my global knowledge into another sphere. And then 5 months after I had come back from national security, I started Zoma. So I started Zoma while I was still working in my past employ. So I kind of like I was doing both at the same time. I was virtually onboarding clients while I was working my 9 to 5. I used to tell people when it was 4 o'clock in the evening, I used to tell people, well, I'm on my way to my next job. So after a while, I realized that it was time to make a clean break. And I had a very good mentor who said something to me. And he did say this. He said, you know what, Rhonda, no matter how much you complain about the breaks that you don't get, entrepreneurship is about risk. And what you have to do is literally run to the end of the cliff and bungee jump. And when he said that to me, I was scared. But then while I internalized it after, remember, Zoma has been in existence since 2018. And I was employed in 2018. And I had to make a decision. So it wasn't a question of being pushed out. It was that I had all the moving parts in place. And I had absolutely no excuse but to go towards what I really wanted to do with the rest of my life.
But there are two things that you spoke of, and I want to go back to them for you to expand on them a little bit. One is the fact that you had already, well, you wrote pros and cons. I think sometimes when people are doing that manifestation or articulating what it is they want to do next, they look at the things that they're good at. How important was it for you to write down those cons?
Because let me tell you something, Dike, we are never a finished product. The nice thing about the human brain, it is a constantly renewing resource, not renewable, renewing. Because as more information comes to hand, you are able to shift your parameters. So one of the cons was that I was now moving from what was my comfort area to an area where the variables would not be all in my favor. I would have a learning curve, even though I was going into entrepreneurship with a lot of experience and knowledge behind me. The other thing is I would be virtually alone. So I would literally be responsible for turning my own dollar. Now, that is something a lot of people are afraid of, because it's all well and good to complain about the 9 to 5 or the 8 to 4, complain about the boss, the organization, but it's all well and good to complain when you're in the comfort zone. It's like the bird in the nest saying that the nest is too small, but they're not getting out of the nest. So that was a con. The other con was that I'm 58 and I am now a late stage entrepreneur at a point in time when most people, not just women, most people are now thinking about, growing that garden or taking care of the grandkids, or no shade thrown, preparing myself to meet my Jesus. All of that is what people my age are considering. I was going into another full-time career. So that was a con, because when you are making that kind of a leap, the possibility exists that you will have to build on the way down. And that was a con.
And that kind of reminds me of a conversation that I had a little earlier with someone who was talking about you building the plane while flying it at the same time. So we're going to talk about that late stage entrepreneur in just a bit. But I'm trying to imagine myself saying, Dike, okay, well, you're going to bungee jump, but you're not sure if it's a bungee jump or a GoPro rope you're using. How significant was it that you were able to already start? So there's some level of understanding, okay, this is what I'm working with, before you made that clean break. Because I know sometimes people say, okay, well, I'm going to dive off the cliff, and I have to fly. I don't have another recourse. But what was the significance of you starting and saying, okay, well, yes, at 4, you're going to your other job, but there being that transition from one to the other?
Okay, so here's the nice thing about my experience. My experience as a trainer, as a course developer, I had already started to work as an adjunct lecturer in a private organization. I had spent 2 years away from my employer, which I think was a very good thing for me, because I had to operate in an entirely different environment. I had the framework of my organization, but I was just one of many, because we were attached to the office of the Prime Minister. So I was one of a team. And it wasn't Rhonda and that. It was Rhonda being Rhonda. What does Rhonda bring to the table? But what made me feel very comfortable? Entrepreneurs have to be comfortable with uncertainty. It is a given. What made me feel very comfortable is that I said to myself, you know what? For whatever reason, if this doesn't work out, if it's going to take longer, if the lag time is more, if the break even is more, then if worse comes to worse, I could go back and do some work as an adjunct lecturer. I have 43 degrees, completing a 4th. I had options. And it is the options that I had that allowed me to say, you know what, in a worst case scenario, this is what can happen. And I'll still be moving forward. So I think that was it.
And that kind of reminds me of different spaces that I've been in, and the ability to be able to say, no, thank you, with all respect and humility, but you also have an idea or an objective idea of your self-worth, to be able to step away from something because there is not the room at that table that you want. You're able to eat alone. But in terms of being able to go a slightly different route, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, startup, why actively target some clients who other possibly more established companies who might be making money would not necessarily have on as the first people on their go-to list?
Okay, so I love that question. And I'll tell you why. Because being a researcher by trade, in research, you look for the gap. It is the gap that you're going to fill. Research, I remember, because I am a doctoral candidate as well. The research tells you that all research, no matter how much research you do, all research fits on the head of a pin. And it is the collective pins that are going to make the picture. So it was all well and good to go where people were already. It was more important to go and fill that gap, because just as you have just said, the gap is not being filled. The gap is absolutely not being filled. And I had to dig very deeply to figure out who are the people that I am going to serve. Business is not about selling, it is about serving. Because the last time I checked, people buy from people. So I had to do that. I also had to think about who would be my clients, who would be the people that I would bring under the tent. And those people really are female entrepreneurs, because female entrepreneurship is a fast developing demographic in the Caribbean, even worldwide, but more so in the Caribbean and Latin America, because our experience of entrepreneurship is almost part of our culture. We have always had women who worked outside of the home, or women who did a side hustle to bring an extra dollar to the table. We always had women who would take in washing, who would make some sort of candy and sell it outside of a school. We always had women who would take care of other people's kids. We had women who would plant a kitchen garden and they would sell in the market. We are surrounded by entrepreneurship, but we never formalized it, because the truth of it is that the women who had to do that, they didn't want their girl children or their sons to have the experience of that struggle. So they tried, in our minds as a Caribbean people, we thought that the measure of success was, and I put it in quotations, the good permanent government work. This is what we saw as our measure of success. So even if they had to plant garden, as we say in the Caribbean, or they had to do that kind of sacrifice, they didn't want that kind of sacrifice for their kids. But here's what happens, especially for women. We have been conditioned to believe that if we graduate at the top of the class and we get all the awards and we get all the accolades, that would guarantee a seat at the head of the table. And as a lecturer, as a course developer, I will tell you that the classroom is a controlled environment. The operational environment is where the rubber hits the road. And a lot of the time, women go into the operational environment and the theory does not manifest itself. So they start to feel disappointed, because they start to think, you know what? I graduated at the top of my class and I'm reporting to somebody who barely scraped through.
And that kind of shift in mindset is something that we want to start on when we return from this break. Stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are going in depth on the work of business strategist and mindset coach, Rhonda Maria Glynn. Dike Rostant here with you. This is In Depth. And Rhonda, just before we took the break, you were talking about mindsets and expectations versus actuality. And with that, I want to ask, what are some of the biggest obstacles that some of your client base faces? Is it logistics in terms of finding resources or backing funds and materials, or is it mental? Some of the things that you were hearkening to in terms of what I expect is not what actually is, and I'm not kind of willing to say, okay, well, this is what the reality is, and I need to work with it.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing. Everything else in business is tools. Whether you are going to put in an AI system, a CRM system, whether you are going to hire a social media person, every single thing that you're going to use are the tools of production. The mindset cannot be replaced. Because if you do not have the mindset for success, if you are not willing to stretch, if you're not willing to lean, then everything becomes difficult. Keep in mind that we are becoming the people that our parents and grandparents never thought that we would become. Harkening back to the whole idea of the good government work. We are becoming the CEOs of our own lives. And by extension, we have to, in so doing, create new realities for ourselves. One of them is building legacies. The other one is what is my relationship with money? The other one is, how are we going to measure performance? Are we going to measure performance based on what we think it is or what it actually is? Because numbers is a whole different language. I did an MSc, and I tell people doing an MSc is like giving birth to a square watermelon. I should have done an MBA, but the thing about it is that in doing an MSc, I understood that numbers is a totally different language. And going into the big, wide binary world that we live in now, you cannot do anything else. So the mindset is important. You have to throw away some of the ideas that you thought that would stick and stay. They're not going to work because the mindset has changed. Coming out of a global pandemic, some of the things that an entrepreneur has to consider, or anybody in business, not just entrepreneurs, anybody in business, you have to understand that your reason for being, your why, is going to be critical going forward, because people are only going to care if you care. So the mindset is very important. And the thing about the mindset is that a lot of the time, this is where people stumble and fall, because things like your break even. The average company is going to break even within 3 to 5 years. A lot of people believe that if in the first or second year, the business is not making a profit, then that business is not good and I am no longer good. So we internalize it without understanding that there is a need for process. There is a need for you to pay attention to the little things. There's a need for you to put yourself not in the money-making mode, but in the excellence mode, in the process mode, that you are going to have to go out there and ask your clients, whether your client is 1 client or 10 clients, you are going to have to ask that client, who are you? What can I do for you? How can I serve you? You're going to have to go and find those things. And those things have to do with your mindset. You have to be in it. Remember, think about this for a second. And I spoke about this just this week, that the truth of the matter is this. An accounting concept is a concept of a going concern. It means, therefore, that you're in business until the wheels fall off. Let that sink in for a second. You are going to be in business until the wheels fall off, or unless you sell the business. It means that you're in it for the long haul. And your mindset to keep going, even when you are not sure how things are actually going to turn out, is what is the most important thing. It's the most important thing.
And I really, if you want a mindset coach, I would say I would assume or presume that you want the way that you use that as a keyword in the conversation, in the narrative.
Exactly. Exactly.
But some of the other words that you use, though, ecosystem and the tribe. And I want to ask you about the importance of that, especially with what you just said, the tendency sometimes for individuals to equate the value of their business or the worth of their business to the value of themselves.
I love that. Now, let's talk about the ecosystem now. Immediately going forward, let's have a chat about the ecosystem. Nobody's going to make it out here alone. And that is something that I see, especially in our country. I see people still believing that they have a scarcity mindset. So they believe that there's never enough. So my candle cannot light other candles without me losing heat. So I know something, so I will keep it to myself. And I hear a lot of entrepreneurs say that they don't show people what they do because somebody is going to take their idea or their process and replicate it and become their competitors and do better than them. There's a response to that. The response to that is this, that there is everybody, and then there's Dike. There's everybody, and then there's Rhonda. So if you notice, in the wider society, people share everything. People don't keep anything to themselves. So the ecosystem exists because that one hand, out of one comes many, the Jamaican mindset, because you cannot make it by yourself. You cannot, you absolutely cannot. I built a business on one of the strongest things that I've learned in aviation, which is networking.
And in the last minute that we have, I want you to speak about that a little more, please, in terms of the idea behind creating a platform for those persons to network and to see that they're not working in extremely unique circumstances in many instances.
Okay. You are who you say you are. You are going to draw the people who will believe what you have to say or what you have to offer to you. You build on that platform and you develop that platform. Because for everybody who's selling sneakers, there's Nike. For everybody who is selling shoes, there's Louboutins. For everybody who's selling jewelry, there is a high-end brand. But you are not going to make it by yourself. It is never going to happen. It is never going to happen. So building that ecosystem means that you are going to get help and you're going to help others. I built my business based on the fact that entrepreneurs need help because all resources are finite. So sometimes the resource that you will get within the ecosystem is a referral. The help that you're going to get in an ecosystem is a process, a way of doing something faster and better. The help that you're going to get in an ecosystem is the ability to simply vent. I am in this place. I am frustrated. I do not know if I'm getting this thing right. You are going to get a listening ear. And as I like to tell people, what you think is a boulder might very well be a pebble. And you will never know if you isolate yourself from help.
All right, thank you so much. And the pebble that we're dealing with is time now, unfortunately. But we want to thank you so much for these words of wisdom that you've shared with us. Rhonda Glynn, business strategist and mindset coach. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, I'm Dike Rostant. This has been In Depth with me. Thank you so much for joining us.